So anyway, advanced production. I do want to mention you all will not take your InDesign exam this fall. Like I know last year you took Photoshop at winter break, and then you took, or the idea was you were going to take Illustrator in the spring. Some of you never got to take Illustrator. If you are one of those that never got to take the Illustrator exam or like didn't get to complete it, that is going to be our focus for you at winter break is we are going to start working toward that for any of you that still need to take that just so that you can have that done. And then the spring we will concentrate a lot more on InDesign. We are going to start to do a few InDesign assignments before the end of the year though, so I just want you to just get really excited about that in the back of your mind. Okay, but just FYI for those of you that are in advanced production, I will try and stagger it for you. So if you still need to take the Illustrator one, we'll take it this semester, and then we'll worry about InDesign in the spring. But so for those of you that are in advanced production, if you look on Canvas, I have got a new project for you, kind of posted here. All right, and it's a fairly loose project to an extent. Let me explain what I mean. Okay, and some of you may remember when they kind of did these last year. Still lives are a new required part of the media arts curriculum. There's something we didn't have to do previously. It was instated last year. So I know last year it kind of got thrown in right at the end of the winter like semester last year. And then I don't think it necessarily got as much attention as it should have. But the idea behind the still life is that you're going to create a digital composition in Adobe Illustrator of inanimate objects. Okay, the examples that happen to be up on the screen are all food. And if you look really closely, they're all food with faces. These are all by the same artist named Lauren Martin. And you can look up her stuff online. It's very adorable. But she was just someone that was quickly like a good example of vector style still lives. She does a lot of like living things as well, but she does a lot of vector style still lives that are similar to kind of what we're working on. So the idea for what you're going to do for this project is that you are going to either come up with a collection of things that you want to photograph to create a still life of. So those could be things that you have at home, like action figures, just like important mementos, things that you like or that you would want to put in a composition. And you can set them up and take a photo and bring the photo to school. Or if you want to bring the items in, we can use lights here in the classroom and we can set up a pretty formal little like photo booth situation where you can take your pictures here at school of your own objects if you would like. Now, if you don't want to do either one of those things, you can pick out a still life photograph online. And you can find lots of high res still life photographs online. They just tend to not be quite as exciting most of the time because they're just random things like flowers, food, vases, that sort of thing. So if you want something that's a little bit more personal, you may want to collect your own items, but it's not necessarily required. What is required though is I want you to have a photograph that has all of the items in that photo so that all of the lighting is there for you and that everything matches up. I don't want you to create a collage of photographs of different objects that you put together in Photoshop. I want them to actually be in the same photograph at the time that the photo is taken so that we can better control the lighting. The big part of this project is going to be working on cell shading style. Okay, which is a very basic type of creating shading and lighting effects in vector artwork or in any kind of digital artwork, actually. And we'll get into that a little bit more later this week. But that's why I want all of the objects to be in the same photo to begin with. So I think last year the requirement was that you had to have 10 to 15 objects, which feels like a whole lot to have in a picture, especially if you're going to end up tracing them and outlining all of them in Adobe Illustrator. So this year, I'm going to simplify it a little bit. Okay. At a minimum, you need to have at least 5 objects. And again, they can be anything that is inanimate. So something that does not move. They could be action figures, clothing, they could be food, they can be plates or jewelry or like sports equipment or shoes or like any kind of thing that just doesn't move on its own. All right. You should have some variation in size though. So think about having objects that are of different sizes. Like you don't just want to use all action figures that are exactly the same height or exactly the same width. Add some diversity to your scene. Okay, I do want you to think about trying to kind of crop in on your composition. So what we don't want is we don't want a picture that has like mostly table in it and then your objects are just kind of small and in the center. We would want to crop in on that, and I can help you kind of figure out how best to crop in on that. It's perfectly fine if some of your objects are cut off or if they're hanging off the sides of the image. As long as they are in there partially, they count as being a part of the image. Okay, does not have to be food. I do know a lot of you will probably just want to find a photo on the internet, and that's okay. 99% of those are going to be of food. And it doesn't have to be of food, though. Okay, I know that's kind of like the boring cliche still life is one that has a bunch of fruit in it. You don't have to do that. Okay, that being said, though, all of your objects do have to be school appropriate. So make sure that you put things in there that are, you know, very PG, very school safe, and not going to raise any like weird red flags or things like that. All right. Do think about what's in the foreground and the background of your image. So, like if you look at these pictures up here, they have very simple backgrounds. Maybe they're a simple pattern or a solid color, and that is fine. Okay. If you have a bunch of stuff in a photograph that you take yourself in the background, like maybe you can see the background of like your kitchen cabinets or something, if you take your own photo, you don't necessarily have to draw all of that. But I do want you to think about how you kind of arrange things in the space. So think about what will be at the lower section of the photo, what will be kind of in the middle section, and what will be in the background to create something that's interesting and that is well spaced so that we have some overlapping of different objects and we have a nice kind of just assortment of sizes and things throughout the entire picture. Every one of the examples on the screen are vertical, but yours don't have to be. It can be a horizontal composition. That is totally fine. If you look down here at the different like requirements for the project, you can do 3 different sizes if you would like, based on whatever you think works best for you. So you can do a square size, which would be a 12 by 12 if you want. You can do a 12 by 16 or a 12 by 18, and you can choose to rotate those vertical or horizontal, however you would prefer. Okay. The main thing I do want you to focus on is kind of like this example right here that's black and white. I want you to really think about the line work for this project. So pick objects that have detail to them, that don't all have the same sort of texture or surface quality. So don't pick 5 objects that are all plastic fruit and look roughly the same. Try to use different line weights, different line thicknesses, and we can use all kinds of different brushes that I'll talk to you about later this week just to give it a little bit more of a dynamic feel. It doesn't have to be solid, basic lines. Okay. We will talk more about the cell shading part, but basically, I want you to think about lighting. Think about the surfaces of your different objects. You don't have to draw a bunch of things that are super shiny or super like rough textures or things like that, but try to pick some stuff that does have a little variation to it. That's not all exactly the same, just so it's a little bit more interesting to look at. We will do it in Illustrator. We'll do it in RGB, and that's kind of the basic overview for it. So I don't want to give you a ton of details yet because I want you to just take some time and find some really good pictures. Now, you can go to Unsplash. I know it's one of the few like websites that's not blocked here at the school for like high res photos. And if you type in just regular old still life, you're going to get a lot of the basic stuff, vases and fruits, and all of that is fine. But you've got to find a picture that's got at least 5 objects in it if you want to use one from, say, here. Now, you can also Google stuff. That's totally fine. You can Google, like, why did I type Google? Google. You can type, like, desk still life photo. And if you can find something that you like that's interesting, cool. That is fine. You can use one of these, but it does need to be an actual photograph. Okay, so no using illustrations as your reference. No using like collages that aren't like all really there in the same space at the same time. If you do want to use things like skulls or other like bones and anatomy, that's fine. Not a big deal. What I mean by like school appropriate images is, don't put anything in there that would hold any kind of products that you would smoke or anything, otherwise questionable in that sort of capacity. Um, but besides that, it's kind of up to you what you want to pick. But I do want you to take some time. This is a project that will take you a couple of weeks The tracing will be a lot. That will be the biggest part of the project, is just creating the lines and the drawings of all of the objects. So take your time and pick something that you actually want to have a drawing of, so that you don't hate the project immediately. Pick something that's not boring to you. And that might take a while, just to find a good image. But remember, you can also just bring some items in, and on Wednesday we can photograph whatever items you would like to include. And they don't have to be like amazing, super crazy, interesting items. They can be everyday things. Okay. What questions does anybody in advanced production have? Oh man. All right. The enthusiasm across the room is crazy. Okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, cool. It was either this or we were going to go right into brochures and InDesign. So I figured this is somehow better. Okay, cool. So take some time, look for some images if you are in advanced production. And if you have a question about whether or not like an image would be a good choice, let me know. Okay, I mean, because I do foresee this being a thing, and it's my own fault for leaving these pictures in here that were used last year. All of these pictures are adorable, and they do have little faces. Okay, if you would like to add a face to something, I'm going to limit you to one item in your picture that doesn't already have a face. Okay, so if you do include action figures, obviously most of them have faces. That's cool. But if you do something like this breakfast scene over here that has faces on every little thing, okay, like if you do a still life of pancakes and eggs, you may pick one thing that doesn't have a face and add a face if you feel very passionately about that. Faces are not required though, but I do foresee some of you wanting to add a little something extra to it. Okay. All right, cool. Look for pictures. Look for pictures.